I'd like to welcome you today to session 25, where we will complete the subject of consciousness, and we will talk briefly about mystery schools, the subject of mystery schools. Going back again to consciousness, let's say that the relationship between our spirit guide, which is the higher self or another positive being, and us, as the student, is the means by which we continue to maintain contact with and act as the instrument of the true source of all things, which by whatever name we use is still God. This careful, methodical progression of the student is tried and true, and will allow the seeker to work toward becoming an instrument of the higher positive unseen forces. Even then, however, remember that regardless of what one comes to know over the years, it does not necessarily qualify one to be able to know where or when or how to best teach such things to another. It all comes down to the fact that we find that we can become no more than an instrument of God, the true source of all things. Given that truth, many have asked, why would one begin by seeking communication with the higher self rather than directly with God? In response, let me say that from a purely mystical or spiritual point of view, generally we would be wiser if we did not approach the Father directly as soon as we begin our journey on the path. This series of videos addresses the more respectful approach of dealing in the beginning with our own higher self. This part of us is also attuned to and is part of the spark of God that lives within us all. For many of us, that level of contact will be sufficient in this lifetime. For some, and let me again stress the word, a few others, they will take the next step when the higher self says it is time of working with other higher unseen guides, which could be one of those we have at each shoulder. For still fewer of those people, when the time comes, and it may take years, as I stated continually, they may be then introduced to a guide at a higher level still, and could begin to receive guidance from the Holy Spirit, who is Beatrice in Dante's Paradiso. Perhaps a few others will go forward further still, through a planned hierarchy of other unseen guides, until the time comes when they have prepared themselves sufficiently that they are found to be ready. At that time, they will not need to go to the Father. They will be invited by the Archangel, who takes them by the hand and brings them, in spirit, to the throne of the Father. There is a long and difficult path to that worthwhile destination, and only a few may find it. The end of that journey then opens the door to the beginning of yet another in His service. There may also be variations for different personalities, but generally, although some may vary, as I said, generally this is the road that will be traveled by those few who should consider themselves very, very blessed. Please do not misunderstand, however. The beloved Father has never turned away from a heartfelt prayer, a bowed head, or a bent knee, nor do I believe He ever will. However, for the sincere seeker on the mystical or spiritual path, who is willing to take the long, difficult road that eventually leads to the highest peak, then an approach much like the one described is worthwhile to be sought. It is for that reason that I have taken this approach in my speaking to you. All of this, which has touched on so many things, is not meant to be a lecture or a sermon, but to simply point out, for some, what a few who have already passed this way on life's path may know already. That consciousness need not be, nor is it intended to be, static or stationary. It is intended, certainly in the case of human beings, that they at least have the opportunity to make the choice to be constantly evolving and growing mentally, psychically, mystically, and hopefully spiritually. Our consciousness can continue to grow far beyond what has been mentioned here. But be aware, as stated many times before, that such change, such growth does not generally happen in a few days or weeks or months or even years. It could take even many lifetimes. If I remind you of that fact 100 times, it will not be too many. So great is its importance. It is suspected, however, that most of those who watch these videos have already experienced significant previous preparation over many incarnations, or you probably wouldn't have sufficient interest in the subject to have watched this far. By availing yourself of and using the information that is in these videos, and by utilizing the additional sources that are referenced here, you can begin your journey along the path. That journey can be a long and difficult one, and some may fall by the wayside, while others may simply become distracted by one or more of the many other aspects of our lives here, and end up staying in that place, that way station, for example, in their lives without attempting to return to finish their journey. By practicing the suggestions and principles outlined throughout this series of videos that consider life from a spiritual perspective, and making these suggestions and principles a part of your daily living as you find it reasonable over a period of time to do so, you will find them to be of significant benefit, and they may also help you to avoid pitfalls along the way. Do not use this statement as an excuse to procrastinate, but remember that wherever you are on the path, I suspect that it's right where your higher self wants you to be. Continue to think about the things that are in these videos, and if it is your destiny to move forward, seek to do so, and if it is your destiny, so shall it be. It should be stated at this point, however, that when the time comes that these blessings begin to manifest in your own life, I want to tell you this is extremely important. You may be so pleased and excited that you'll want to tell everyone you know, to share the news about your blessings with your family and your friends. May I once again offer a very important word to the wise. Please be very cautious. Those whom you want to tell may not at all understand or be nearly as enthusiastic as you think that they will be. They may even possibly think that you've become a bit delusional, maybe a lot delusional, or perhaps that you're in league with some negative religious cult. These kinds of blessings are intended by those who give them to be very personal in their nature, and you should give extremely serious consideration to keeping them that way. Speak to others of such things very selectively and judiciously, if at all. And let me stress, if at all. Another subject that needs to be considered at this time, and this will close out this particular session, is that of those places which offer a structured, well-designed approach to spiritual studies. Some of these have been known by many names, but the name Mystery School is the one that I would suggest using, and the one which I have heard used many times in the past. For many, many centuries, even millennia, there have been schools that have privately and quietly taught esoteric principles and truths to those who were ready. Some of the earlier schools that are generally talked about were in ancient Egypt. These Egyptian schools were attended by many personalities from antiquity, some of whose names you would probably recognize at once if you heard them. The schools in Egypt were preceded by similar schools in Atlantis, and so on further back than we can even speculate. These schools taught their aspirants, their students, regarding esoteric matters that were considered as great mysteries by the masses of the peoples, if they even knew them at all. The schools, over the years, were given many names, but the name by which most people who are familiar with such things know them today is, as mentioned, mystery schools. Some of these schools have continued over the years, and there are some that exist today. There are also a number of organizations that may not necessarily be mystery schools in the formal sense, yet they may conduct seminars and or offer teachings and information of various kinds that are worthwhile. It should be the personal decision of each seeker whether or not to affiliate themselves with such a school or organization. I can assure you that some have teachings that are very worthwhile and which can be of great benefit as you travel in your journey along the path. I will mention only a few with which I am somewhat familiar, but there are undoubtedly others, and as indicated earlier, the seekers must make such decisions for themselves. The school that comes first to mind is that of the Rosicrucian order, AMORC, A-M-O-R-C. Now there may be more than one Rosicrucian order, but only one may use the term AMORC, A-M-O-R-C, which stands for Ancient Mystical Order Rosicrucis in the name. And that is the one with which I am familiar, and that is the one which I would name to you here. They are located in San Jose, California, in the United States. I have also heard of an organization called the Mayans, which I don't believe is in the United States, but I'm not certain of that. There's additionally an organization that was formed on the basis of the readings of the man Edgar Cayce called ARE, the Association for Research and Enlightenment. They are located, I believe, in Virginia Beach, Virginia, in the United States. The speaker makes no recommendations regarding such matters. Once again, this should be each seeker's personal decision whether or not to make such an affiliation, and if so, with whom. I want to thank you for watching, and in session 26 we will consider a very important subject, the subject of angels. You are invited to watch, and I thank you for watching this session.